Welcome back. My name is Chris, and in this video, I'm going to be doing a review on the third-party application NetAsset, which is basically an alternative to NetSuite's fixed asset management module, also referred to as FAM. Now, NetAsset is created by a company called NetGain, and you might have seen me mention NetGain in other videos. I also have done a review on some of their products. They basically make products that serve functions of the CFO office, so things like FAM, end of month closes, leasing, etc. And it's important to note that this video is not sponsored by NetGain. However, if you are interested in a product like NetAsset, you can check out the link below, which does help support this channel. And if you're finding this video helpful, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. And if you'd like to see other specific reviews on either NetSuite features or other third-party apps, let me know down in the comments below which products you'd like me to review. So in this video, I want to take a look at NetAsset from a standpoint of what are some of its key features, how does it compare to FAM, and what are some of the pros and cons of using a product like NetAsset. And to do a proper comparison to fixed asset management, we really should take a reiteration of how the process works within FAM so we can do that comparison. And if you remember some of my earlier videos on fixed asset management, the way it works is you have a FAM asset type, which is basically a template that both dictates what assets are going to be proposed as fixed assets, as well as the various accounts and parameters that are going to be associated with those assets. So it starts with a FAM asset type. From there, you have the proposal of assets, then the creation of assets, and finally the depreciation of those assets. So with that in mind, let's take a look at how this works with NetAsset. All right, here I am in the NetAsset demo account, and the first thing I want to take a look at is, again, the equivalent to that FAM asset type, which is the template. So in NetAsset, we come up here and we're going to go down to NetAsset Setup, and you'll see right here we have Manage Asset Types. So if I click on that, it brings us to this page, and you should recognize this from the FAM module. It's basically showing all these types. So we've got things like buildings, equipment, furniture and fixtures, etc., machinery. So we've got all these types, and let's click on one of these and take a look at the things that go into one of these net asset types. So going to this one, we have, so this is furniture and fixtures. You can see the useful life, the depreciation method. These are all things that are completely similar to the FAM module. Where it gets a little bit more involved is whereas in the FAM module, there's about 5 or 6 accounts that you can link up to. In this case, we have over a dozen, and it just gives you a lot more options. You've got various clearing accounts. You've got things like impairment expense accounts, if that's relevant for your circumstances. And there's other things that you can set that you don't have as an option on the FAM module, such as these buildup accounts, disposal conventions, etc. So a lot of different features that are available with that. Once you have your net asset types created, there's actually a few different ways that you can generate the assets themselves. And if I come over here, we can come down to create new assets. Now, in the majority of cases, you're going to create assets through proposals. And I'm going to show you that in a second. But before I do that, I do want to show you have the option to create a single asset as a standalone, which again, there's not many cases where you'd want to do that, but you do have the option. You can come in here, you can put in the name, you of course would set the type, the net asset type that we just looked at. So let's say we picked furniture and fixtures. It automatically does things like fill in the depreciation method. If you scroll down and we go to the accounts, you can see down here, we have all of the accounts that you would have set on that net asset type would automatically fill in here based on that type being selected. And if we come up to the top, so some of these things, again, are going to be similar to the FAM module, but you have just many more features in every regard. So if you're looking at capitalized asset value at the in-service point, you can set that. You have more options for the residual asset value, all of these different things, the acquisition date, as well as the in-service date, whereas in FAM, you can only select one of those dates. So a lot of different features available there. But as I mentioned, you would most likely be creating these assets by coming here and then going down to create assets from proposals. Now, there's actually 2 ways you can do that. One through a clearing account and one through what's called a construction in progress account, or a CIP. So I'm going to show you the clearing account. And the reason you would select the CIP account is if you're in a circumstance where, let's say you're buying a number of different assets like equipment that you're going to be bringing together and creating, let's say, a large piece of machinery, and you want to depreciate that as one asset. So over a period of time, you're accumulating various assets as construction in progress to then have one depreciated asset. And you would be best doing that through this CIP account. But here we're currently on the clearing account for proposal. And you basically have a bunch of filters here at the top. Again, this is going to look very similar to FAM. You set the filters at the top, what accounting book you're looking at, what subsidiary, if you want to limit it by that. And then it's going to give you a list of items. Now in FAM, the way this differs is you actually do a step where you create the proposals. In NetAsset, you can see it's already proposed things to us just based on the fact that you have these NetAsset types, right? Those templates that are going to dictate what should be proposed. They're automatically put here based on the filters that you have above. So you can see we've got probably a few dozen different proposed assets. And you can see basic information such as the asset's name, its date, the transaction that created that thing. And you do have the ability, let's say you notice there was an asset here that is selected as being one certain type of asset, like machinery and equipment, and you realize that really should be categorized as a different type. You could just come in here, select whatever that new type is, and it would automatically, upon creation of that asset, it would go with that new type. So with this list, we can either select individual things. So let's say we want to create assets from this. We could select these three. We could come up here and we could go mass create assets and would simply create those. We might also have an instance where we're not necessarily doing a CIP, right? Where that might, over a period of time, new bills might be coming in and we might be adding that to this final creation of an asset that's going to be depreciated. But let's say we have three things just on this list that we do want to end up combining into one asset right now. We do have the ability to create single asset right here. But in this case, while I could select all of these and create them all at once, just for the sake of this demonstration, to keep it relatively simple, let's select a couple here and let's create these assets. So I'm going to mass create these assets for the two that I selected. So it brings you to this page. You can see that it is currently processing, and all we have to do is hit this refresh button to get the final result. And as you can see here, it's now created these two assets. You can see it's got all the basic information we saw on the previous page, in addition to the fact that we can see the status at this point is pending. And you'll see why that's important in a second, but keep in mind that at this stage, we haven't actually done anything that's finalized. We haven't capitalized anything yet. It's still at a pending status, which gives you that flexibility. At this point, you can still make modifications. And that's really going to be a keynote you're going to notice throughout this demonstration, is that at every step along the way, you can make modifications if you need to add in bills, change them, split them up, transfer them, whatever you need to do, the NetAsset product will give you that flexibility and that breathing room. So at this point, now that we've created these assets, we would want to generate the schedule for them. So let's click on one of these assets, this one here at the top. And it brings us to this page where we can actually take a look in detail for this particular asset. And you'll see right here at the top, actually, if I scroll down here, notice the depreciation schedule. There is no depreciation schedule. They actually split up those two steps. So you're going to create the asset and then you will actually have the depreciation schedule assigned. And you do that by coming up here and hitting generate schedule. And I'm going to be doing that just for this one asset. You can do this as well as all of these steps en masse by coming up to NetAsset. And if you look here, you could click on this, generate depreciation schedules. You could click on Q for capitalization. All of these steps have the ability to do not just for one, but of course for an entire group. So in this particular case, I've got generate schedules right up here, and I'm going to click that feature. So we get this notification that it's been confirmed that the schedule needs to be generated, and it's going to do that process now. So if I hit refresh on this, now that that notification's gone, that means it has fully generated that schedule. So we can actually scroll down here and we can see the full schedule here. So we can see the start dates for each period. We can see the total amount as well as how much it's going to be depreciating over each month, which in this case, it looks like we have a straight line. So it's pretty straightforward. Also notice at the far right here, we have this column for the journal entry. there hasn't been any depreciation occurring yet, so there's no journal entries to look at. But if you come mid-life cycle, you're going to see all these journal entries with hyperlinks that you can click on and actually take a look at the journal entries that were done for each of those periods depreciation. So coming back at the top here, again, I'm going to say this many different times, but at this stage, you still have the ability to build it up. So let's say new bills are coming in, you realize you need to add that to this particular asset to build it up, or maybe you want to split it from one asset into multiple assets. You have that ability. You also have the ability to create an alternative schedule. And there's kind of two circumstances where you would do that. Either you want to use alternative schedules for reporting purposes, so not having any kind of general ledger impact, you just want to be able to see certain reports of your fixed asset management and some of the details included therein if you get that additional feature added to NetAsset. Or if you're using multi-book accounting, you can use those alternative schedules for the various books, in which case it would be GL impacting. So at this point, the next step is to queue this asset for depreciation. And you probably noticed that at this point, we've split off from how FAM handles things because they would generally go straight to the depreciation itself. But with NetAsset, there's these additional steps added in that give you that flexibility for whatever your basic segregation of duties is. So let's say you had a junior accountant who's doing all the setups and everything that I've shown you so far in terms of getting these net assets proposed and created, but you want a more senior individual who's going to actually be approving these things before they're capitalized and depreciated. So you can set things up, and in the process of implementing NetAsset, you can basically set up these permissions so that that individual, that manager, can come in at this point and see all these things that are ready to be capitalized, and he can hit Q for capitalization, and then it can go back to whether the same junior accountant or maybe a different one who will then make sure that this thing is in fact capitalized and doing the monthly depreciations, etc. So at this point, we are ready to capitalize. So I'm in an administrator role, so I can do it all myself. I'm gonna hit Q for capitalization. And as you can see, it says this asset status has changed. So really what is changed here that we can look at is down here, the status went from it's been pending this whole time, it is now ready to capitalize. And again, we still have additional features at the top here. We could still split this thing off if we wanted to, or we could go to the capitalize step. However, instead of clicking on it for this particular asset, I'd like to go up here and show you the capitalization and depreciation for a whole set of different assets. So we'll do that by coming up here. We'll go down to process monthly journals, and we'll click on run monthly asset journals. So it brings us to this page. Again, this should look relatively familiar compared to what you're going to see in FAM. You've got a number of filters at the top. You can set it by subsidiary, period, book, different classifications, all of these different things. And then below, you're going to have all of the things that should either be, in this case, you can see many of these over here, they're in service. So they've already started depreciating, and we can do this period's depreciation. Or if you look further down on the list, you'll see ones like the one we just created that is ready to capitalize. So you can capitalize that and do the first journal entry. Now, one thing I do want to point out, which is not a feature that many people will necessarily run into, but it might be helpful for you. If you click on this, notice it selected all of these at once. And if you really look at these, you'll see this is actually one asset that we're looking at here, but it's for a bunch of different periods. You can see August, September, October, etc. And really what this feature is doing is, because this is a demo account and someone's not actually doing the depreciations every month, this asset, as well as the ones underneath it, they haven't been being depreciated every period. So the backlog, right, if we're looking, we're trying to depreciate for the month of March 2024. So because August, September, all these previous periods were not depreciated, it's actually going to pull up all at once and force us to not just be able to do the depreciation for the current month, to make sure that all those previous periods were also depreciated at the exact same time. So it auto selects all of them at once to depreciate. So let's select a couple of these. Let's say we've got these two assets and all of the different periods that we want to depreciate. We're going to come up here and we're going to go create journal entry. And it brings us to this page. You can see over here, the status is complete. And if we scroll down, we can see all the journal entries that were used for these two assets, but over all of those periods that were backlogged, every single journal entry you can see here on the right. You can see the value for each. And we even have a processing status. In this case, each of them was in fact successful. You can see the dates, all the basic information is there. And we also have the ability, if we come up to the top here, we can even click reverse journal entry. If there was a mistake or there was a reason that you did not want that to actually run, you could simply click that reverse journal entry and undo it. So if we come over to NetAsset and go down to process monthly journals, you can see we have this feature here, approve monthly asset journals. And it brings us to this feature where you can basically select approvals on journal entries. And there's many different use cases for that. You might want approvals to be required before you can actually capitalize assets. And then after that, they can simply go through automatically without approval. Or you might want the flip to occur. You might want certain types of assets to need approval, not others. Whatever the circumstance is, you can utilize that if it fits your needs. And before we move off of this completely, I do want to point out, we've just shown kind of the whole flow line from the start to finish. And if we take a look at just any particular net asset, we can see, so this one in particular, this is for an office building that is currently mid its depreciation life cycle. When you come to the asset, again, you have so many options. Even when you're mid-life cycle, there's still so much you can do with this particular asset. You could, of course, depreciate it for the current month. You could do a revaluation. Now, you can see over here, we have the edit button. That's just because I'm in the administrator role. In most cases, for most roles, you will not have that edit button available at all. And in all cases, it is not recommended to simply edit the asset record itself. If you had a reason why you realize that actually the asset is worth more than it is or less, you want to true it up in some regard, you can always come over here and simply revalue the asset. You can also reverse the entry. In this case, the last thing that was done with this was a revaluation. So it's not reversing a depreciation, it's going to reverse the revaluation. You can, of course, dispose of the asset. You could dispose a piece of the asset and keep a remainder depreciating if you wanted. You could transfer it in whatever way. You could, of course, build it up if there's more bills coming in that you need to add to that asset. You have the ability, even though it is mid-life cycle, you could place it on hold so it's no longer considered in service. Maybe it's in storage. You don't want it depreciating. You can put it on hold. You can split it up into multiple assets. All of these different things are available to you at any point in this life cycle. So that's really the general concept of how this net asset product works, but there's a few additional features I want to show you. And the first thing is the concept of reports. If I come here and I go down to reports, you can see I can click on all reports. And if you've worked in FAM, you know that you can make reports for FAM, but it doesn't natively come with reports. Whereas with NetAsset, you can see on the top here, we have 40 total reports that are custom made to fit basically any requirement you could imagine for fixed asset management. And a lot of these you will have no need for, but there's some certain key ones like the asset balance roll forward report. You might also, this is a commonly used one, the depreciation waterfall report, as well as you have basic things like the asset register. You can take a look at any of these reports. Many of them are constructed using saved searches. So by doing that, if you have a report that is useful, but you want to make modifications to it, maybe you want to take out certain columns, add other ones in, add highlights, resort them, you can do all of that using the standard save search functionality. Another key feature of the NetAsset product is that it can work with a multi-book accounting setup. And that might not be applicable for a lot of companies. For those companies that it is applicable for, it's really unnecessary because again, when you're dealing with FAM, it does not have that option to use the fixed asset management module within multi-book accounting. Now, to give some basic information about the implementation process for NetAsset, it generally takes about 90 days to do the cutover fully from FAM to NetAsset. It might take a little bit longer if you're actually mid the process of transitioning to NetSuite in the first place. But again, that's just because there's more moving parts involved. In general, if you're already on NetSuite, the process takes about 3 months. The NetSuite team, or I should say the NetGain team, actually works with you they manage the whole implementation. They don't just leave it up to you. They provide support during the process and training to make sure that you're actually familiar and can use the product correctly, as well as post go live support to make sure that it is as painless and as smooth as possible. I know for some clients, there can be some hesitation because in certain cases, the transition from an older system to FAM can be pretty arduous, but in general, the process of going from FAM to NetAsset is relatively painless just because NetAsset has that flexibility and those features that can accommodate for the fact that if assets are mid-life cycle, etc., they can be brought in and that information can be stored relatively easily. So what are the downsides of using NetAsset? Well, because NetAsset really does all the same things that FAM does with additional flexibility and additional features, there's not necessarily a user-based downside. Really what you want to take a look at is what is your experience with FAM. If you're finding that FAM is suiting all your needs, you don't have complex requirements, you're not running into a lot of errors that you're having to fix and kind of unwind in NetSuite using the FAM module, if all of those are not a problem for you, then the FAM module might be a perfect fit for you and you don't necessarily need to move off of it. However, if you do run into those problems, if you have unique scenarios, or if there's errors that you need to double back on and fix, or you just need that extra level of functionality, the reports that go with it, multi-book accounting, any one of these additional features, then checking out something like NetAsset is a pretty obvious choice, at least to see if it would fit your requirements and be a best choice for your company. The biggest downside being the fact that it is more costly than NetSuite's FAM module itself. So you would be paying the implementation price, there's a fee that goes with that, as well as an annual subscription fee to have the NetAsset product. So that's all I have for this review. If you want to check out NetAsset, click the link below, subscribe if you haven't already, and with that, I'll see you in the next video.